and she's wearing kind of a silvery looking gown, not a flight suit type thing, but a very kind of feminine looking gown that's tightly kind of tied up at the waist and so forth. And then kind of an amazing thing happens. Billy, as he's walking towards her, he suddenly feels this, he's kind of overwhelmed with this sensation of love and concern. It seems that Ascot, now being quite a telepathic person, also has the ability to project her feelings and her thoughts. And what she's done is she is, instead of shaking hands and saying hello, much like we might do, instead she projects all of her feelings and concern and love for Billy and pushes them right into his being. And every cell in his body, he said, is just kind of overcome with this immense love and caring that she has. He suddenly is just kind of like stupefied. He can hardly move. As well, he also at the same time feels very familiar to her. He almost recognizes her as someone that he's known before. There's this tremendous feeling, I guess, of deja vu coming over him, but he can't quite tell what exactly it is. She picks up on these thoughts and tells him to search his past life once again for the meaning to this. Not much is said at this point. They just talk for a few minutes, and she invites him to come with him right into the ship, which happens. Excuse me. They again float right up into Ascot's ship, which is very similar to the one that he has just flown there in, except this one has 3 seats in it. They get into the ship and they take right off, and she has not even explained where they're actually going. The ship lifts off the ground again, and again, just like the first one, it becomes invisible. And even though he knows he's still in a craft, a flying craft of some type, all is invisible. Even the ship, he doesn't see his hands or anything. He can't even see Ascot. And she's not speaking. It's very quiet. The ship then darts across the countryside, and he notices again now it looks like they're over the Mediterranean Ocean. And he's kind of surprised because he really doesn't know where they're going. And very quickly the ship begins to race back down towards Earth, and he finds himself standing in Egypt early in the morning. And as he looks down, he sees that the Great Pyramid there, the Great Pyramid of Giza, just outside of Cairo, and that the ship is coming down, and it looks like it's landing right next to the Great Sphinx. Well, the ship still looks kind of invisible, and Billy can't understand how all of this is really possible. And Ascot says, well, it's time for us to leave the ship. And she senses Billy's bewilderment about the invisibility and explains to him not to worry, because even though there are people milling around on the ground, the merchants and so forth that are up early in the morning, they can't see the ship either. And he really can't understand how this is possible. And she says, well, here, this will help. And she says, I have a little device you can put around your waist which will enable us to see each other, but no one else can see us. So she's putting this around his waist, and as she's doing it, suddenly Billy can see Ascot kind of kneeling down in front of him, attaching this thing to his waist. And he's kind of surprised because now he can see himself, and now he can see her, but no one else can see them. They're just kind of hanging there in space because he can't even see the ship around him. So they leave the ship, and they find themselves standing on the ground there next to the Sphinx, and there are people milling about. She senses his thoughts again, that he's challenging how this invisibility may be possible, and so she invites him, go ahead, try out touching someone, which she could feel in his thoughts he was thinking about doing. So Billy walks over to a couple of men that are standing there and walks around behind the fellow and notices that he's not being observed, and tugs on the man's cape. And the man kind of turns, doesn't see anybody, doesn't see Billy, and turns back to speaking to the man he's speaking to. Well, Billy's just flabbergasted by this. How is this possible, this invisibility thing? They're walking along, and he's still thinking about this. They come across this tent. Billy ducks his head inside of the tent once more to test out this invisibility. When he looks inside, there's 7 young women there and 2 older women. One of them has a young baby that she's nursing. Billy walks into the tent. No one is noticing him again. Now, in this type of world, if young women are in a tent, they would have surely noticed a man coming in, especially one that was sitting there nursing a child. And they're washing clothes. Ascot follows Billy right inside of the tent. Actually, I should be calling Billy Edward now, because at this point in his life, the name Billy has not been used. And Ascot is calling him Edward, so I'll try to remember to call him Edward throughout these travels here, because the name Billy has not even come up yet in his life. That's not his real name. It's just a name that he adopts later on in life because of his fondness for the Westerns, and in particular Billy the Kid. But his real name is Edward, his middle name is Albert, and his last name is Meier. So he was born Edward Albert Meier. And at this point in his life, as I mentioned, he's still being called Edward. So Edward enters the tent, and Edward is there with the 7 women and the 2 elderly women. And for some reason, he just decides to test out this invisibility thing again. And Edward walks over to a young woman who's sitting there on a bale and who does not have any clothing on her top. Apparently, her clothes are being washed, and she's naked from the waist up. He gently kind of bends over and gives her a kiss right on the lips. Well, the woman jerks back a little bit. She doesn't see anything, but she's felt that she's just been kissed on the lips. And she looks a little bewildered and so forth, and raises up her left hand to her lips, and like, trying to figure out what happened. Well, her hand falls back down to her side, and Billy does it again. This time he moves in and gives her an even nicer, warmer kiss right on the lips. And the woman, her eyes just kind of roll back, and like she's enjoying it. And suddenly, she just seems to kind of swoon and begins to faint, like she's going to fall over. Well, Billy catches her and helps her sit back upright. The other women in here aren't even noticing this. Okay, well, I guess if they can't see Billy, what would they notice? So the woman that he's just kissed, after a minute or so, kind of clears her head and gets her consciousness and begins to explain what just happened to the other women that are in the tent. And Billy hears Semjase just kind of lightly laughing in his head. And so the other women swarm around her, and Billy says, Edward says, "What's going on?" to ask it. And she says, well, that the woman has just felt like she's been kissed by an angel. And she's explaining that to all the other women. Billy goes over, and he goes to each one of the other women that he can get to, and he kisses each one of them also right on the mouth. And one by one, they're all excited and so forth. And as they leave the tent, Billy is, remarking about why are they all getting so excited? And, will they think this is a strange experience? And Ascot remarks that, no, Edward, it's not a problem, that she had pushed into the thoughts of all the women that they had just been visited by a loving angel of luck. And now that their life surely would be better in the future, because it's certainly been hard in the past. So they all feel like they've had a wonderful angelic experience. So Edward somehow feel like he contributed to the welfare of these women who are washing clothes. They no sooner leave the tent, which is right next to where the Great Pyramid is, when Ascot leads Billy right into the side of the pyramid. Apparently, somehow with these devices, it doesn't say they go around and walk in the door of it. It's more suggestive that somehow they go right through the side of the wall and find themselves in these long, dark corridors somewhere in the deep part of the pyramid. They do not go up into the king's chamber or the queen's chamber. They are somehow down in the lower part of the pyramid in some dark hallways which are not accessible to the normal people and don't even know they exist. They move along these corridors. They're being very quiet, and still they're invisible. They come into a particular area where there's some big altar there. There's even a guard standing there, and Billy's a little surprised. And it's an armed guard of some type, a human-looking individual. And Ascot warns Edward and telepathically to be very quiet, that they're going to move right past this guard. They don't want to be sensed here. That there are descendants of an extraterrestrial race living down here below the pyramids. There are quite a few of them. She'll tell him more about them later on, but for right now, be quiet because they don't want to be detected. They seem to move right through another wall again somehow, and they're continuing down this corridor. They continue deeper and deeper and past several guards, and soon they come into a huge hallway, kind of a big open area. Billy estimates they're probably 300 or 400 meters down below the pyramid at this point. When they come into this large open area, Billy is surprised at what's down there. There's a huge flying saucer. A big flying disc is down there, a big silver one, way below the ground. It's possibly been there for hundreds or even thousands of years. Ascot confirms in Billy's mind that yes, that's true, that it's been down there a long period of time, that when the ancestors of these people came to the planet, they hide one of their large ships down there underground. And she's not sure exactly how long it's been there, but quite a while. Billy's looking around this room, and he's surprised to see also over on a platform there that there is a large cross that looks like the crucifixion of Christ. It's a large cross about 2 meters in height. Also, there are some nails laying there. There is this crowned wreath with the thorns in it and so forth. There's a purple robe, and there's a little leather bag with some precious stones. And Billy, all sorts of things are running through his mind. He says, surely these must be the crucifixion tools of Jesus Christ. But he's a little confused because early in his life, Sfath had taught him that the crucifixion was real, except that Immanuel really did not die. And he was explaining to him all about the truth of what Christianity was really based upon. So he was really kind of confused because here was the crucifixion tools of Jesus Christ, and now he's really confused. He didn't know what was going on, and Ascot was offering no explanations at this point. They immediately, Ascot takes Edward's hand and leads him back out of the pyramid. And it's been kind of a surprise to him when he comes outside. It looks like they've actually been gone for a couple of hours, and he thought it was just a few minutes. So he'd kind of lost track of how much time had been going on there. Well, they get back into Ascot's ship, and they leave Egypt. And when they do, they fly back to the area in Jordan where the other ship is also waiting, and they land in this remote area in the wasteland somewhere, in the Waste Mountains and somewhere where the Dead Sea is at. Well, they spend 2 days there for Ascot explaining Billy all sorts of information. During these two next days in the ship alone with Ascot, this actually is the beginning, you might say, of Billy's mission. For the next 2 days, she explains many things to him about himself, his future, his life, and start to explain some very important things that he's going to need in his role as a prophet during this lifetime. One of the things they talked about was creation. He's slowly becoming educated through Sfath and his recent experience under the pyramids with the crucifixion tools, more and more information about the life of Jesus Christ and religion. And she begins to explain to him a little bit about what creation is. And she just gives a few explanations here. She says, the universe, what we call the universe, this large thing, full of planets, galaxies, and nebula and all sorts of things, they call it creation because they regard it as a living thing, as an evolving thing. And she explains that he will become more and more knowledgeable about this, but she wanted to explain to him that the creation itself embodies the entire life of all living things in the universe. It is responsible for the existence of all things, including that which we call gods and all other forms of life forms. There is a creational force. The universe itself, then, is alive. It is an evolving form of energy. That originally the creation had the idea to create a universe, and it did. That idea then embodied all of the information that was necessary for that idea to expand and evolve into matter, which became the planets and all the galaxies, the universe we were in. So the creation actually is the life force and is responsible for all existence in the universe. And this is one of the main things, information that's missing on our planet, and that they really wanted to start teaching Billy because this would be an important part of his mission. She explains at that point that that was also the mission of Immanuel during his time, that he was trying to explain to people about what creation is and about how life procreates and evolves throughout the universe, but they weren't really able to understand it, and most of the time they misinterpreted it. And that in the year 189, when Christianity would actually be formed, it would be somewhat altered in order to form Christianity. Nothing particularly malicious, I don't believe. They probably just did the best they could at actually understanding it. She also mentioned that it had been for 33 centuries that she and her people had been coming into our universe. She explained that she actually was not from our universe, that there was a neighboring universe they called the Tao universe, and that her race of people were called Timmers. Her planet that she came from was called Akon, A-K-O-N, and that For many years they'd been coming into our universe. There were technologies that provided a way that they were able to build some sort of barrier or a canal or a cave, whatever you want to call it, that allowed them to come from their universe into ours. They'd been exploring for some period of time. They had found their way into the area of the Earth and finding human people here as well as on many other planets, and were involved in just as explorers and experimenting into our universe. She had also discovered long ago that the Earth people here on Earth did not originate here, and this led them to